Moving and packing has been an extremely stressful situation. It always is. I've made a couple big moves in my life. The first one was when my mom moved us out of Miami, and I remember we packed up all of our belongings in the back of my mom's Ford Taurus. Our dog was sitting in the middle on a little cushion that we made, and our trunk was packed and the back seat was packed, and it was just me and my mom, and I was 17 years old, and we drove from Miami to Las Vegas with hopes of a better life. When we moved to Vegas and we had our first apartment there that we ended up getting evicted from because we couldn't pay the rent because my mom only had enough to pay for 3 months up front, and I didn't really want to live in Vegas at the time. I was homesick and I wanted to go back to all my hood rat friends and do hood rat shit in Miami, that I didn't get a job right away, and we got kicked out of the apartment that my mom prepaid for. That was probably one of the most stressful moves and situations that I was ever in, and me and my mom were pretty much homeless living in our car at that point, and I think I had just turned 18, or I was just about to turn 18. Being in a position like that was very scary, and luckily I had made a few relationships with a few people that did take us in and were able to help us, and I'll forever be grateful for those people that did help us at that point. And eventually I started working, and my mom ended up getting a decent bartending job in Vegas, and we were able to then move into a weekly apartment. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with weekly apartments. They're basically places that people who have terrible credit or just don't have steady incomes are able to rent, because you pay for the week and you get kicked out if you can't pay for the next week. And we lived in that weekly for almost 6 months, maybe longer than that. It's been a long time, so it's hard for me to remember. And after that, we were able to get a more steady place to live, and we ended up living in an apartment in East Las Vegas, which was in a pretty shitty area, but it was no worse than where I grew up in Miami, so it was fine for us, and we made it work. And then my mom ended up kind of like not working because she started getting old, and nobody wants to hire an old bartender. And eventually we moved out of there, and then we moved into a bigger apartment, and a good friend of mine became my roommate, and it was him, me, and my mom in a 3-bedroom, and it helped out with the rent. And then after some time, I ended up moving in with my girlfriend, who is now my wife, and my mom lived with us then too. We got a bigger house, and it was, at that point, it was like the nicest house I'd ever lived in. And we ended up moving to North Las Vegas. We had like a swimming pool, and we were just renting. It was right around when the recession happened in 2008. This was probably around like 2010 now. It gets a little hazy when I start looking back, but I remember we got like a really good deal on the place, and it was the first time I ever lived in a really nice place, and I never experienced that before. We were able to help my mom get her own place. We became more steady, and eventually we started fixing our credit. We started saving up money, and my wife and I bought a house together before we got married. We did under like a partnership, and then we went in as like, if anything happens, we'll split up, and we both own this house. We did things backwards, I guess. Most people get married first, then buy a house. And then we sold the Vegas house. We moved to Washington, and that was fairly stressful. It was hard to do with 2 small children at the time, but we really wanted to get out of Vegas, and we were gonna make some equity on our Vegas home. And then we moved to Washington, and we bought a home in Olympia, where we lived at for a couple years. And then after COVID happened and house prices started to rise some more, I felt like, hey, maybe this is a good time for us to sell this house and kind of figure out what we want to do. And we did. We sold the house. We went on a little road trip, and we visited her parents and took the kids with us. And then that's how we ended up in our most current situation, which was renting a house from my brother-in-law, who had just flipped a house that he completely gutted and remodeled and extended. And we rented there for a very good price. He gave us family discount. We've lived there for the last year, and now moving out of there to go on this crazy adventure, going through all these experiences of making these big moves with these big changes, and remembering how stressful every time we do it is, but knowing that every time we have done it, something better has come. It's kind of like that butterfly effect. And I think I've talked about this in my most recent video, how so many little changes have led us here. And even though things feel super stressful at times, and making a move that you feel might just be the worst decision you may have ever made turns out to be the best thing you could have ever done. That's what I'm realizing now. And I want to keep making those moves that make me feel uncomfortable and that make things feel stressful, and having that little bit of unknown, but knowing that that unknown may lead to something better makes things just so much easier to follow through with. While we're on the topic of making moves that can better your life, I'd like to take a moment to thank Shortform for sponsoring this video. We all know that there's a lot of value in reading books, and reading the right book with the right information can help us improve many areas of our lives. Shortform makes getting that value and information much easier by providing us the world's best guides to nonfiction books. Their guides are like superpowered book summaries that help you get a deeper understanding of books that you're currently reading, have already read, or would like to read in the future. They have a large library of book guides that cover different topics and categories such as self-improvement, career and success, money and finance, entrepreneurship, productivity, and many, many more. I personally like to use Shortform's one-page summaries, which are just a quick 10-minute breakdown of a book. This will usually help me decide whether or not I want to commit to reading the full book. I also use it sometimes to just refresh myself on a book that I have already read. For instance, one of the books that really inspired me to make this move and try to pursue passive income and financial independence was The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco. And I recently used Shortform's one-page summary of The Millionaire Fastlane to just refresh myself on some of the topics and things that were covered in that book. And in doing that, I found other books that I'm going to want to read now, because one cool feature about Shortform is that they have smart insights that highlight key points that are covered or talked about by different authors in different books. And it really helps you find complementary books to what you're already reading if you want to take a deeper dive into those subjects. The best part about Shortform is that it costs as little as the price of one new book per month. If you use my link shortform.com/Dorian, you can get a free 5-day trial, and if you decide to sign up for an annual subscription, you can get an additional 20% off. Again, the link is shortform.com/Dorian. I'll make sure to leave it in the description below. All right, let's get back to the video. The last video that I uploaded, I talked about like how I hate how I grew up and how I want to make sure that my kids don't have to grow up that way, and I refuse to go back to that lifestyle. And now realizing that that's never going to happen, I'm doing things now that I never in a million years thought I would do. I'm doing things that you see people do online and you're just like, that person's lucky. Not anyone can do that. And I'm realizing that you can do anything you want to do. You just have to be able to put yourself in uncomfortable situations and figure out a way to make things work and not be scared to take the leap, because those times when you feel like taking that big leap of faith into the unknown are some of the best decisions that you can make, and some of the best outcomes can come from them. And I'm glad that we were able to pack up our house and get all the stuff stored and get to where we're at right now, and not knowing what the next thing might bring feels more of an adventure than a fearful circumstance. And it feels like something that we're ready to take on and we want to do, rather than it feeling like something that is super scary and may put us in a worse spot. Because I know now that no matter what, things will be okay as long as we're optimistic and we continue to try to improve and do the things that we want to do and have the experiences we want to have. And even though it may feel super scary, that ripping of the Band-Aid and just going through that little bit of pain, that little bit of discomfort, doing something and not knowing what might happen, and then having everything feel like, all right, it was worth it. That's why I did this. And it's also like, that's why my mom moved us out of Miami, because she saw that I was not going to have a future there. And to an extent, that's why I moved my family out of Vegas, because I didn't like the future that my kids might have growing up there. And also it's sort of why my wife and I made the decision of making our most recent move, which was to change things up and see the world with our kids while we're still young enough to enjoy it, and our kids are still young enough to appreciate these experiences and to grow up cultured and know that there's more to the world out there than people who end up growing up in the small bubble. Because I know that my entire life up until the point I was 17, I had rarely gone any further than a few hours outside of Miami. And the furthest south I went was Key West, and the furthest north I went was Orlando, until my mom made that move when I was 17 years old, and then we went like 3,000 miles across the country. And I saw what I thought was the world at that time, and now I'm really seeing the world. And just to end it on a funny note, when my mom and I were driving, I think it was through Alabama, I saw a hill, like just a small hill on the side of the road, nothing big. And I asked my mom, is that a mountain? And she laughed and she was like, that's not a mountain. That's barely even a hill. And then I remember going through like New Mexico and going up a steep mountain and a steep grade, and my ears popping and seeing all this orange rock and this different type of nature that I had never seen, and now flying over the Atlantic Ocean to Portugal, and then driving through Portugal to Spain, and then now we're making our way up Spain to go to Italy and France and eventually the UK. It's pretty crazy to just think I'm some kid from the ghetto who grew up without a father in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment with his mom, and now I'm giving my kids an experience and the life I never thought I would have, and now I also have the life that I never thought I would have. I really wanted to get some of this B-roll that I had recorded during the move out. I am currently in Spain, and I am gonna kind of backtrack on some of my videos to catch up to where I'm at. I have a lot of footage that I need to go through, and I just wanted to make a little update video and talk about some of the stuff that's been on my mind. All right, with all that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.